Thank you for joining me for another episode of Awaken Empowered TV. I'm your host, Ethann Fox. Today I'm joined by James Gilliand. James is a minister, counselor, internationally known lecturer, best-selling author with the books Reunion with Source, Becoming Gods, and The Ultimate Soul Journey. James appeared in Contact Has Begun, His Story, The History Channel, UFOs Then and Now, UFO Hotspots, ABC, Fox News, BBC, Danny Dyer Special, Paranormal State, ET Ranch, a documentary, and the new movie Thrive. All have featured James and ET, for which he is the founder. He has appeared on Coast to Coast, Jeff Rents, and numerous other radio shows, and is also the host of As You Wish Talk Radio on bbsradio.com and Contact Has Begun on worldpuja.net. He is a facilitator of many Eastern disciplines, a visionary dedicated to the awakening and healing of humanity and the earth, and teaches higher dimensional realities from experience. Thank you for joining me today, James. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you again. I was just on your show, I think it was a couple months ago, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and it's an honor for me to have you on my show as well, and I've got a lot of very interesting questions. But first, I mentioned a little bit of your bio earlier, but if you can tell us and our viewers a little about your history. How did you come into the field that you're in now and running the ET Ranch? And did you always start out this way or have an interest in these areas, or did it evolve in some interesting fashion?
Yeah, it was a very interesting fashion how it evolved. But I was raised in the high desert as a kid, and at 5 years old, I had bronchopneumonia, and I was dying actually in the hospital. And I had an apparition appear to me, and she would talk to me and stroke my head, and she would get me through the night. And several times the doctors told my parents that I wouldn't live, through the night probably. And I came out of it every time. And the last experience was she gave me a substance that was the consistency of ice cream, but it wasn't cold, and told me to eat this. And I did, and then I was never sick after that. I didn't miss a day of school, and that was my first experience. And I found out it ended up to be Mother Mary, and I'm not Catholic, but she did appear to me, and I didn't even know who she was at the time. So that was my first major experience. And then I got caught up in, the societal programs and school and everything else, and kind of set aside a lot of my intersensitivity and abilities that I had as a kid, because I was extremely sensitive. It's very telepathic. I would hear what people were thinking, hear what they were saying, and I know what they were feeling all at the same time. And so all that input was coming in. It was kind of rough as a kid. But, social consciousness kind of knocks that out of you, school and everything else. You find out you have to turn down all those frequencies, you might say. And then I had my own office. I was doing commercial real estate. I had, people working for me and was doing really well. And I had a drowning. And that was about, now it's about 35 years ago or something. That happened 36 years ago. But I had a drowning and just went through the tunnel everybody talks about, and ended up in this plane of bliss. And that's what launched everything. The near-death experience just launched everything. And so after that point, I was just committed to the awakening healing process, my own understanding of what was going on, and studied with yogis and lamas and quite a few different organizations, and went through their programs and studied just about every process-oriented therapy you can think of. Like I got involved in so many different processes, and then I started having visions. I had a place in Santa Cruz, California. And I started having visions of this beautiful piece of property with an incredible view of a mountain in front of me, and a little mountain behind me, and a river. And I kept seeing this over and over again. And I knew that was where I needed to go. And I got a map of the United States, and I used a pendulum and other divination methods on this map. And I found out exactly where it was. And what's funny is I threw the map away and forgot about it. And I ended up here anyway. So through a synchronistic events that just kept happening, I end up exactly where I marked on the map, and right at the base of Mount Adams, which is this beautiful mountain with the White Salmon River on my eastern border and Little Mountain behind me. And the odd thing about the vision was I kept seeing the words Little Mountain, and it didn't make any sense to me whatsoever in the vision until I got to the property, and it's on Little Mountain Road, and there's a little mountain behind me. So that's how that tied into the vision.
So how long ago was this that you came upon the ranch?
Well, I've been here about 30 years now. So it was about 30 years ago. It's hard for me to believe it's been that long. It just seems like, everything's been moving so fast that it's hard to believe I've actually been doing this for 30 years.
So it's a very interesting story, and one of the things I find very fascinating about it is that it seems like your life was very much guided in a particular direction. So how did you manage, how did it work out that you could purchase this ranch and make all those things come together? Did everything just align and fall into place?
It did. I actually was buying property and I'd go in and totally gut it and remodel it and then turning it around. And I was doubling my money every time I did it. And I was involved in that, and that actually got me the funds to buy the ranch. And so my real estate investments and things gave me the money to buy the ranch. But it's just really interesting because I had a house in Santa Cruz, which I was trying to sell. And this woman named Maya, just beautiful woman, came up to me and she goes, I know what you're doing. And I know this is really important that you get this property. And I couldn't sell my house. My house wasn't selling at the time. And she just gave me the money to buy this ranch, And I said, well, do you want me to sign something or anything? She goes, no. She goes, you'll pay me back, So it was pretty interesting how that turned out. And I did. I sold my house and I paid her right back and bought the ranch. But it was like there were so many things that happened, synchronistic events that happened to make this a possibility that there's just this huge force behind making this happen.
I asked you that story because I think a lot of people, and myself included, I've had a very interesting journey. I've pretty much started this journey the last about 4 or 5 years ago, the one that I'm on now, and I had an experience where I was in a state of bliss also, and it started all these ideas in my head and everything that has since happened. And even this show that we're on now all just kind of manifested as a result of that beginning. And I think and I hear this from a lot of people who are, especially people who are light workers on the journey, who are working or living a more conventional life, and they're wanting to do something different, but they're not really sure what to do. And wondering if they take that risk, will the universe support them? It sounds to me like in your case also, it's been when you stepped out into what was your purpose, you were supported in following that through.
Yeah, exactly. What I find is when you're truly aligned with your soul and your soul purpose, it's like the whole universe gets behind you and supports you. And I know a lot of people are in between worlds right now, and they're having a really hard time, and they realize the world they're in just isn't working. It's not sustainable. It doesn't bring them any joy whatsoever. And they're having to do things that are out of integrity that they don't agree with. So there's so many people now that are actually leaving, the corporate world, you might say, or other programs, and moving into a different lifestyle, a different way of life. And I've seen, if you just simplify, you don't need all the stuff. You can be happy regardless. That's what I tell people. It's like, it's amazing. People get a new car and then they're happy. I got a new car. And then somebody smashes it and then they're sad. And their self-esteem and everything is attached to that vehicle or that car. And it's just a car. It shouldn't. Your self-worth, everything should not be attached to that vehicle or material objects or things like that. And so we have to break that old program. But I know if you just simplify and, with me, I was most happy when I was closer to nature and working in nature and living a simple life. And in doing so, I found out just the stress levels, everything just went down, and I just was much happier. And I just didn't need all the programs and all the stuff. I didn't need to keep up with the Joneses, and the other thing. It's funny, my dad's first name is Jones, so it's kind of interesting. But yeah, so anyway, so that was that's what happened with me. And I just followed my inner guidance. I dropped down into the heart and with everything and asked, is this in my highest and best good? And I sat with things and meditated on it. And every time when I'd get out of my mind and get out of the ego and drop down into the heart, I would be guided, and the guidance would always be very accurate.
So is your family more conventional in their mindset, or were they really supportive of this path?
Yeah, not anymore. They aren't. They were at one time, but they've just seen too much. They've watched me, and they've seen too many things manifest, and they've seen the ships come and go, and masters appear and things like that. So they just can't, they can't argue with what's going on anymore. And so it's created a whole shift within my family as well.
Why is it that they wouldn't support you now that they've seen all of that?
Well, it's kind of interesting, with the older generation, they weren't really supportive until, I wrote the books, the 3 best-selling books, and all of a sudden I'm a best-selling author, so now my son, the best-selling author, is out there. And then they saw, when I went to these conferences, they saw like colonels and Air Force, colonels and coming up to me and just thanking me for the work I was doing. And it was kind of a shocker to them, because here they thought I was, the black sheep, Fruit Loops basically. And now all these people are coming up and thanking me. And so it was a major shift for a lot of them. And even with my daughter, she was kind of, there was a separation, and she went with her mom for a while and got caught up in the old program. And, I was the crazy father, or whatever, and so finally, when I could spend more time with her, I brought her to some of the events and things like that. And all of a sudden her whole world just got a lot bigger. And she found out that I was very well respected, and that I did have a lot of friends, and there was, I was surrounded by some real loving, heartfelt people.
So let's back up to when you first came on the ranch. How did that evolve into what you're doing with all of that now, and all the sightings and everything else?
When I first came to the ranch, I was focused on creating a healing center, basically. And we were doing everything from the ground up, like living a very natural life, growing our own food, very close to nature, meditating, 2-3 times a day, just everything in balance. We were doing a lot of process-oriented therapy here, and I was doing counseling and a lot of self-mastery workshops and intersensitivity training workshops and things like that. And so the whole ranch was mainly focused on a more spiritual approach, to life and balance, finding balance in your life. And what was interesting is and I tell people this, on the path to enlightenment, you're going to run into ET, that's just the way it works. So there are higher dimensions, there are very spiritually and technologically advanced civilizations out there, and they're monitoring us. And when they see that we are reaching a certain level of consciousness and they actually can work with this, they find us, because it covers the frequencies and the light that we're emitting. They go, okay, here's one just lit up, this one's ready. And so it doesn't diminish God to talk about this. It just makes God, much bigger, it's not just, we just don't have a little old man with a beard, watching over Earth. We have something much more unlimited watching out over the multidimensional, multiverse that we live in. So
now you've been running this ranch for 30 years, and people come there on retreats to look to basically experience these extraterrestrial sites, right? Well, what else do you do there?
Well, we still do a lot of process-oriented therapy. We do counseling. I do counseling work, transpersonal release sessions, where I take people, first I clear away any unseen negative influences or any attachments, and then I'll find out who their main teacher and guide is, and then clear up any past life things that are hanging out and clear those off. And then I'll go from age 1 and pull any blocks or patterns or childhood traumas that they've had. And we clear those, and then we initiate them in the end. And it's like a quantum leap in consciousness that when they go through this process. And I've had, skeptics come up here and say, you can't do that. And psychologists say that's impossible to do that much work in one session. And each time, the scientists came up and they brought their equipment and monitored it. And they they were shocked when they saw the energy come into the room and saw people's bodies pixelate into light, and using this PIP technology or Herald Oilfield technology. So it's they observed it and they said, wow, it is working, and a lot of them went through it themselves after the process. So it's just a matter of, I just say, it's like just light in, garbage out, basically. It's like, you bring in this 220 energy and it just lights everybody up, and you can heal very quickly and gracefully, and it happens very, very fast.
Mm. Now, what you're mostly known for are for UFO sightings, correct?
I would say so. It's kind of interesting because the UFO phenomenon that's happening here actually drew so many people to the ranch. Otherwise, that would have never come. And when they come here, we say, well, great, you saw a UFO. Now what? Wouldn't you like to know who they are and how they live? And wouldn't you like to develop yourself spiritually so you can actually have a communication with them and things like that? And so in a way, a lot of people that have come here just to see the UFOs realize that there's much more to the story, and they start on a spiritual journey and start their own awakening and healing process.
So who are they and how do they live?
It's interesting. One group, the Pleaidians, I love. They're just pure bliss. When you hook up with their energies, you get real giddy. It's a real giddy energy, very blissful. They're very genetically refined. They're our ancestors and just beautiful. They don't have war. They don't have disease. They don't have lack for anything. They have conquered all of those problems, and they're far beyond us. They have unlimited fuelless energy. They have not just anti-gravity, they have counter-gravity, and they can jump dimensions in their ships. And the whole universe is their playground. And they have they all have councils that they go to or that run, their leadership is basically councils, you might say, and the leaders are chosen as to their spiritual adeptness and their track record of commitment to serving their society. And so it's different. Whoever has the most money, it's like power and wealth, gets elected. Whoever can buy off the newspapers and everything else seems to get elected here in our country, which is sad because some of the most corrupt people are in the most highest positions on the planet, and that's why the planet is in the condition it's in right now. But they have a whole different approach where they're very telepathic. Nothing's hidden. You can't lie. A politician would last about 5 minutes in their society, most of them. But, because they would see right through them. They would just read that person, know them better than they knew themselves, so you just can't get away with that stuff in their civilization. But they also take their kids, which is amazing. At about around the age 8 or 9, they take them up on these beam ships, these light ships. And when they power up these ships, they go into what we would call a near-death experience because they become a light being. And when that happens, they realize that they are one with this greater consciousness, and this greater consciousness permeates everything and everyone. It's omnipresent, and so they become one with this source, whatever you want to call it. Everybody has a different name for it. And then when they bring them back, they know their sole purpose and what their unique purpose is, and they give them everything they need to excel in that area. And so now you have a kid that has everything he needs to excel and reaches his highest level, who also sees God in everyone and everything. So you can imagine what kind of civilization they have now.
So what is there? So you spoke about the Pleaidians. I'm sure there must be a multitude of different races. What are some of the other ones that you've made contact with?
Well, there's the Pleaidians, and there's the Orion Council of Light, and they're a little different energy. They're also very advanced beings, very loving beings, but they've also been tempered by some wars with the Reptilians and some Greys and some other energies. So they're a little more down to earth and matter of fact, and they're down to business. They're not as giddy. The energy's not as giddy, but they're an awesome group to hang out with. They're extremely involved in the liberation of Earth right now and cleaning up the consciousness and energy here, along with the Pleaidians as well. And then we've had a lot of contact with Andromedans as well, which are mythologically known as archangels. They have magnetized light bodies, and they're 8 to 10 foot tall beings. But their body, their energy fields are like a magnet, and like the energy bands that go around the body, when they come into this dimension, they feather back and they look like wings. But it's mainly what you're saying is their energy body. And there's a whole civilization of them, and we've worked with that group. And the Andromedan Council is like the high council, you might say, that all the other ETs kind of go to. The Pleaidians actually went to them and asked them if they would lead them, and they said no. And they said, why? And they said, because you need to lead yourself. We'll advise, but we're not going to make your decisions for you or choose your evolution. So they're extremely wise and very, very loving and very powerful beings as well. And then we've had a lot of Syrian connection lately, which is really off the wall, because these beings they're humanoid feline beings that we've experienced, and they're also very loving but very protective. So they on the seventh dimensional levels, they call them the protectors of the gods, and they're these 17 foot tall lion beings. So. And when I first encountered them, I thought I was going nuts. I said, what is this? Where is this, some hologram or something? What the heck is this? And then I started looking in history, and I found out that they're all throughout history. And Sekhmet was one of these beings, and there's 14 foot tall statues of Sekhmet, which are correct. That's how tall she was. But also Narissa and Narshringa and the Pashat, and everybody has a different name for these beings. And they all say that they're protector spirits. They're here to protect, the people that are aligned with Source, you might say, are doing the work of Source or God or whatever name you want to give it.
So is it fair to assume then that a lot of the archaeological discoveries around the world, say the Sphinx, for example, which is a lion being of some kind, was actually an extraterrestrial race, possibly?
Yeah. In the carvings on the walls there, you'll see these upright humanoid lion beings walking right alongside the pharaohs and the Anunnaki, and they have all these statues there, and they did. I mean, it was that wasn't just somebody's imagination. And I've talked to some of the Egyptologists, and some just flip out, when you tell them that these are real, these reptilian beings standing next to the Anunnaki with crocodile heads, are actually real. There are real beings, and they have a hard time with that. And they say, well, they just represent this or represent that. And I said, no, actually, they did exist, and not just there in Egypt, but they existed, in India and other ancient cultures all knew about them. And people are actually having encounters with these beings around the world. There are so many people now that I've heard from that are having encounters with these beings that it's too widespread, to be a myth, basically. I mean, they're definitely real beings.
Now, I've heard a lot of theories on reptilian beings and greys and Arkons and so on. Some tend to conflict a little bit, and everybody seems to have a slightly different view. Yeah. What's your perception on that from your findings?
Well, there is a grid. It's called the Arkon grid, and it's a draconian ruling problem that we have here. We've had here for some time, and that's in the middle of being cleaned up. Actually, it's almost done. They've almost torn this grid down completely, and they've removed most of the beings that were part of that grid. There's just a few left, and some of the really last bad nasties have been taken out just as the last week. They've done that. But a lot of that's being cleaned up. There's an old saying, just because you're dead doesn't mean you're enlightened, and just because, you're an ET doesn't mean you're benevolent, because there are some that are not in our highest and best good, and there are some that are like predator and parasites, that need to be removed. And we're in the process of that. There's a major effort right now. It's a planetary liberation effort where all these other benevolent beings are stepping in right now, and they have full use of creational energies. They're extremely advanced beings, and there's no way these other beings can hang on, they're out, basically. Their time is up.
So if that's true, then why is the state of the world still so much as it is right now, at least in the mainstream. Now, obviously, there is this undercurrent of awakening happening, which I'm very well aware of, as are you, I'm sure. But why is it that there's still a very dark influence in the world?
Well, basically, when you go up the hierarchical power, and wealth ladder, you might say, as you go up there, you've got the major corporations and the banksters, and then you go up higher, and you have the Illuminati boys, and that group, and they do ceremony to these beings, to these really nasty beings, and there's rituals and sacrifices, and it's really ugly. It's beyond ugly. And when you get up into the higher levels, you go into the unseen influences, which are these Arkon entities and reptilian beings and things like that. And so we're in the process of removing that level. So that level is being cleaned up and taken out, but we still have the puppets down here, that are running around. The Illuminati puppets, were puppets for these other demonic type beings or low-level entities. And so their world right now is unfolding. It's imploding, actually. So it's from the top down, basically. They're floundering. The Illuminati and these other guys, they're just totally floundering. They're spilling the beans on all their games that they're playing and the genocide and all the other things they're doing. They're getting busted right and left. So we're in the process, I call it, Armageddon. We're in the process of Armageddon, which is the great uncovering, where all this stuff is being seen for what it is, and everything that was hidden, is going to be coming to the surface and being dealt with. And so now we're at that process where we were totally ignorant of this happening and what was going on these other levels. Now we're awakening to what's going on, and we're getting assistance by these higher dimensional beings. And that's being cleaned up, and now we're in the process of holding these other people accountable, for what they've done to humanity and the earth. So we're right in the middle of that process, and I think in the next 2 years you're going to see amazing things happen, where the people that don't align with the evolution of the earth and are not frequency specific to the earth's evolution are not going to be here. And so those people with their constricted hearts and their frequencies are just going to implode. Basically, they're going to drop with heart attacks and all kinds of other problems because they just can't make the shift.
Now, so basically you're saying a 2-year timetable, but when do you have any concept of a timetable as far as when the world is really going to shape up into something that those of us who are on this, who are already conscious would want to live in that world?
Well, they keep telling me 16 and 17 that these next 2 years that everything is really going to hit the fan, and so it's very important for us to not to step out of that, stop feeding the beast, step out of that other world and start creating a different world, and align ourselves with unity consciousness, and that's. The Mayans call it the 9th wave of unity consciousness. Well, everything that's in disunity, that's playing the separation game and the greed and all the other programs, separation games that are going on there, they aren't going to make it, through this shift, because this wave of energy is exponential and it's getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And that's why so many people are just going through the ringer right now. I'm just watching people's whole worlds fall apart, and their relationships, everything is just is in major transition, and that's just what this energy does. There's an old saying when they asked Jesus, he said, "Are you a peacemaker?" And he said, "Yes, but first I bring a sword." And the sword is just cutting away the nonsense, the stuff that we don't want to face, the stuff we've shoved under the rug, and all that other stuff, and the denial of who's actually running this country. All of that stuff is coming to the surface. So it's the people that are on the wrong side of the fence, you might say, are going to have a major experience. They're going to have a big karmic backlash to what they've been doing.
Now, I've been hearing from a lot of people all over the world who have been who are actually trying to be on the right side of things, but are experiencing a lot of turbulence in their life, relationship problems, all those things you just mentioned. So you're saying that's basically just a factor of this transition of the energy, right?
Yes, it's part of the process. It's like, a good example is the sun. Okay, the sun has just been throwing off one major flare after another, and coronal mass ejections and things like that. Well, when these energies come in, they affect the bioelectric fields around the human body, and they affect the weather. You know, we have crazy weather, unstable weather. We have an increase in earthquake and volcanic activity and everything else. And so what happens is whenever you inject a lot of energy into a system, everything has to change, and it has to rise up to that occasion. So you can watch when a major solar flare goes off, and you can just watch people just get into their stuff and have emotional outbursts and have bouts of sadness and everything else. And Stanford research has actually proven this. When they took monkeys and exposed them to fluctuations in the magnetic fields, they exhibited behavior from comatose to self-mutilation. But we don't have to act like monkeys. You know, when we understand what's going on, we'll say, oh, this is a flare day, or this is a huge shift happening. You know, I need to go with this. I need to flow with this shift. I might need to lay down and just chill out today, there's so many different ways of understanding this process and depersonalize it, and not, act it out or project it or blame somebody else. Just say, oh, this is my stuff coming up and I need to deal with it.
So can we go back and maybe talk a little about, you mentioned the Illuminati.
Yes.
Can you give a little bit of, as brief a history as you can, of where did this process begin? Where did the Illuminati originate? And how do they come into power, and who are they today?
You know what? There's other people that have incredible books on this that are historians, that have all the details. I'm not a real detail person. I'm in the moment and I see what's going on with the different groups. But they hijacked America a long time ago. And America used to be the United States of America, and now it's United States Corporation. And those guys pretty much hijacked everything and hijacked the Constitution and everything. But we're going to return back to the old ways in the Constitution, and a lot of these other programs are going to go out. The old system and all of its injustices are going to be turned around, and universal law is going to come in and take its place. So we're in that process, and it's all done through consciousness and energy, through the vibrational continuum, because they're clearing up everything on a consciousness and energy level and cleaning up the grids, and then the physical has to follow suit. So that's how they're working it. But these families, we all know who they are. They're the major bankster families and the uber rich. They're out there, and some of them just care nothing for humanity and the earth. They just care about greed and profit and control, and that's all they know. And that's their game, and it's coming to an end.
What's the significance of, I know especially in England, for example, or Great Britain rather, there's a lot of dragon symbology. And what's the origin of that? Is it extraterrestrial or something else?
Well, there were dragons in the past, and I know some people in the royal family that, German royal family. Actually, England is German. The Queen is actually German. But I was asking them about that, the ancient times and things like that. And they said, well, the dragons, in their concept, were benevolent, and they were the protectors of men, and they're the wise ones, and they actually existed. But I kind of see, like in Japan and other countries, they have different types of dragons. And some dragons are really positive, and they're very positive omen, and some are not. Some are bad news. So it's kind of interesting. I do think there are, there's a lot to that. The dragon myths of old, that they did exist, and I think they still exist on other levels. Non-physical levels, they still exist. And there are people that, align with them. Even in Asian things, they have the white dragon and the red dragon society and all these other things. And even some of those societies are very benevolent and positive, and some are not. Some are very controlling. So it's very tricky, to figure out who's who. But I would say anything just because you have a symbol, the symbol really doesn't matter. It's the actions of the individuals or that group, as to what they're all about. And when we develop our inner sensitivity, we can feel exactly who they are. We can read them right off the bat and just say, well, this is this isn't something I want to hang out with, or this isn't something I want to align myself with.
So you mentioned, so basically it sounds like there is this lower consciousness that is present on or in the earth, and you refer to it as the Arkon network, which I've heard before as well. And so this Arkon consciousness has been manipulating the lower consciousness people in the world who ended up being a lot of the leaders of the world. And but there's also this higher consciousness at play as well. So there's this duality that's been operating for some time, and now it sounds like this lower consciousness is being done away with. Am I on the right track?
Yeah, exactly. And it's taking all these different forms and manifestations. But when you know the basic format, you can see what's happening on every level. And I find it's very interesting that observing, what's happening and things that aren't in the news right now that people don't know about. I mean, there's some major things happening behind the scenes that people don't know about, as far as liberating people from this, manufactured lack and the unbridled greed and corruption. And it's coming forward. And I know people that are actually doing it and writing up the paperwork on it and everything else, and the change of power and all of these things. But it's looking really good right now. It's going in a really good direction. It doesn't mean there might be a little rocky road here and there, but ahead of us. But it's looking really good as far as what I'm seeing. And
so what do these reptilian or gray extraterrestrials look like? Have you actually seen them physically, or they project, or how do they appear to you?
I've seen a lot of different beings that are, that I've seen disfigured beings, in the lower astral level or the lower fourth dimension that are human, but they're just disfigured by their consciousness. They look exactly the way they believe, you might say. And I've seen the grays, and I've seen the reptilians, and there's other serpent beings as well that I've had to deal with that are really nasty. They're not fun at all. I experienced most of the lower level stuff, and I was trained in how to deal with that. And that's one of the things we do here, is train people how to maintain their self-authority and heal unseen negative influences. But I've seen the benevolent ones too. But I always tell people, to be enlightened means to be in knowledge of all of it. The whole enchilada, both sides of the coin. The low level stuff and the high level stuff. And there's a lot of people that have half of the coin and think they're enlightened. And then they go, well, if you look at the negative side, then you're negative and it's in you, and they lay all these guilt trips on you and everything else. And I said, well, no, it whether or not I'm here or not, it exists. If I crossed over and I'm gone, this is all going to still be going on, but it won't be going on for me because I'll be somewhere else. But, it exists in and of itself, and we need to acknowledge it. And we need to acknowledge that, our leadership has totally failed, in taking care of the planet and us. And it's time for a change. And, and on every level, the religious institutions, the business institutions, all these institutions need a major overhaul and need to get, in alignment with universal law and alignment with unity consciousness.
So you mentioned earlier about the sun and coronal mass ejections and so on. So what exactly, from your perception and maybe knowledge you've come across, is the purpose of the sun for us on Earth?
Well, you turn the sun off, everything's gone, basically. We're toast. We've got an ice age and everything's frozen. We'll be under like 30 feet of ice probably, or more. But, the sun is so important, but people don't realize the sun is conscious. And those rays of light coming to the earth actually carry with them consciousness and energy, not just light. And information is transferred through the dimensions. There's beings that are less dense physical. There's beings that are pure energy. There's beings that are light beings that don't have physical bodies, and they can actually hang out in the sun. It's not going to affect them because they don't have a physical body to create resistance. So there's beings with ships that are physical ships. There's some that are pure energy ships, and then they have these magnetized light ships that can come right through the sun if they want, which actually is another dimension. It's a portal, actually. It's a massive portal. But the sun has its opposite. You know, there's a black hole, and then you have the white hole, or suns and things like that. But there's always there are actually gateways into other dimensions. And what's really neat is some of these ships that are coming through the sun to help us out right now. They're actually coming right through the sun and coming and helping out the Earth. And the beings on those ships are just phenomenal. I mean, if you can fly through the sun or fly close to the sun, you've got some pretty extreme technology.
Now, the sun, when we have the CMEs and so on, it's affecting our genetics somehow, is it not? I mean, we're receiving a lot more gamma emissions and so on, and especially in the last several years. So what impact is that having on human beings or life on Earth or the planet as a whole, really?
Well, I tell you what I'm observing right now is there's two things going on. One is the whole universe. We're moving into a highly energized place in space that we haven't been in before. And that's creating all kinds of changes, climactic changes and evolutionary changes. And the sun is reacting to that as well. I mean, it's just going off as it reacts to this new energy. So that's one thing that's going on, and it's affecting us on every level, right down to the DNA. You know, it's creating all these DNA changes, and most of them are upgrades. You know, they're DNA upgrades, and we have you know, some people say we have 50 strands and 80 strands. I've heard all these things, but the major strands are, if one of the strands gets activated and opens up, you'll have telepathy. You know, when you open up another strand, you'll have direct knowing, where you're just directly knowing what's going on around you. You know, another strand will open up and you have the ability to regenerate yourself. And, you know, it's like the salamander gene will kick on and we can grow a new arm or do whatever else. And then one of the strands, when it opens up, you can actually see forward or backward in time. And when one of the last levels opens up, you can go forward or backward in time. You know, you can manifest as a light body and bilocate and travel and do all kinds of other things. So these DNA changes that are being activated right now are also activating like cities or abilities in people. And I don't know if you've noticed, but if you notice, everybody's becoming a lot more sensitive, a lot more telepathic. You know, people go, I just know when somebody's going to call me, and I'm hearing that over and over. People just say, I just know things and I don't know why. And you know, it's like, I don't even have to have conversations with some of my friends anymore. I already know what they're going to say before they say it. And that's been happening on a wide scale right now.
So when you refer to strands, you're referring to vibrational strands. They're not actually physical things that somebody would see if they were to look at the physical DNA, or are you referring to what's called junk DNA? Yeah,
you'll see the junk DNA getting activated.
I see.
Yeah.
So the junk DNA basically is they're just dormant genes that are now being activated, basically.
Exactly. It's not junk, you know. It has a purpose, and once it gets activated, people will find out what it is.
Mm-hmm. So we're in a very interesting place in space, as you just mentioned, and if I understand correctly, we're on the flat plane, basically on the universe's ecliptic, right? Or plane?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're kind of going through. We've gone through that. I'm trying to think what they call it. There's a name for it. But it was a major threshold, you know. But we went through that, and then now we're on the other side of it and moving forward. But it was quite a shift that happened, and it affected a lot of people. But I'm seeing right now it's rough on people right now. I've seen a lot of you know, relationships that are just butting heads, and people are really processing, and they're just not doing things ordinarily they would just ignore. You know, they would shove it under the rug and forget about it. You just can't do that anymore. And with all this energy coming in, this shift going on, is that we're just dropping the things that no longer serve us, and dropping even people around us that no longer serve us, or that might suppress us, or they might have a frequency or vibration that we just can't be around anymore. And that's happening on so many levels. And it's a good thing, because it's forcing people to heal and forcing people to awaken and look at their stuff. You can't just keep running from one relationship to another and thinking everything's going to work out, and somebody else is going to fill that big void, you know, inside of you. is we need to fill our own void, and learn to love and accept ourselves first, and then we can love and accept others.
So what about the superwave? It's the superwave. It's like it's sort of like a CME, but on a universal scale, right? Has that been impacting us as well?
Yeah, there's been quite a few. What they told me is that there are a series of waves that have been coming through the planet, and they're growing exponentially, and they're like piggybacking on each other, and that we'll have a really high point, when the top of the wave comes through, and then we have a low point, at the other end, and then another wave comes in. And they're giving us dates and times, they'll tell us like in the next 2 weeks, you're going to hit the real peak again. So you've got a 2-week period, and then we're going to hit another peak of a wave. And they're intense, when that wave is peaking, it does create a lot of processing, a lot of changes, and a lot of movement, so it's but that's what I see. It's a series of waves, and the waves are growing exponentially, and they piggyback on each other. And eventually we're going to hit the big wave where they have the shift, people call it the event or whatever, where everything just finally hits that critical mass and just clicks, pops over.
And you're anticipating this happening in the next few years, or is that something else?
Yeah, I think that is going to happen, around 2017, somewhere around there. Might even earlier, could even happen earlier. A lot of it, people want an exact date on things, and it just doesn't work that way. Things happen when they're ready to happen, and when people's consciousness are in the right space. And sometimes things are postponed because people aren't ready yet for it.
So is there a good place where somebody can go to find the data on when these waves of energy are hitting the Earth?
Well, I've seen it come through a lot of different sources. We have a newsletter, at ESETI. If you go to eseti.org, you can sign up for the newsletter, and we usually tell people, hey, there's another big shift coming up, and get ready for it, and things like that. But I know, I can't offhand remember exactly who, but I know there's some other people out there that are very tapped in, and they keep talking about the same thing, and they come up with the exact same dates, which is amazing.
So when somebody comes to your ranch and they have these UFO sightings, so are you physically, and have you physically seen UFO craft, or are you seeing projections, other dimensional projections? How exactly are you experiencing them?
Well, it's all the above. So we're seeing physical ships, actually photographing physical ships. I've had face-to-face physical encounters with different groups, and some can actually drop into this dimension and work with us, right one-on-one. I've had those experiences, but most of the activity we're seeing here are more light ships that are coming over. And we'll see we stopped counting around 29 the other night, and 25 we just stopped counting because there's so many of them. We're only out for about an hour, and but you'll see a lot of those ships coming in right now. And every once in a while we get lucky and get a picture of a metal one, or a giant cylinder or a triangle flies over, and we get photographs of it. But they often come out of the mountain. We're looking at the south face of Mount Adams, and it's a very well-known UFO hotspot. Dr. Jalen Hynek did research up there, and Greg Long, David Akers, they've all written about it. And even Kenneth Arnold, who lost the sight of the ships when they descended on the western slopes of Mount Adams, which is basically my front yard. So there's just a long history of activity here, and they're actually based in the mountain.
And so you've seen these ships and taken pictures of them in the sky. Have you actually seen them physically in front of you, or even gone inside of them? What are they like?
Yeah, I've seen the physical one that I was around was very simple. It had 3 seats in it, and it had screens all the way around. The windows were more like screens, and they're observing all these different things happening, on the planet. So it was quite interesting. And those were real basic, they were just little runabouts that they used and things like that. But what's weird about the ships would respond to whoever's flying them. It's just like there was a symbiotic relationship. They were actually alive, and the metals that they grew to make these ships were alive, basically, or conscious. So it's quite interesting, how that works. And then I've gone out of body and gone on the higher dimensional ships and met beings there. where they have the ability to just take you right out of your body. And a lot of people don't realize that this is just our vehicle, that we're a spirit that has a body, and that spirit has many dimensions to it. So once we understand the vibrational continuum and start rising up and going up through the dimensions, we're going to have all kinds of contacts and meeting these different beings.
So you mentioned quite a few times in our conversation the idea of dimensions. And I've also heard the concept of densities. Can you give a little bit of a definition about what a dimension is, and what are the dimensions that some of these extraterrestrials exist on, and also where are we as a global consciousness in human form in terms of dimension?
Yeah. Well, basically, we're in the third dimension, and it's the Hertzian level of frequency, you might say. And, that lines up with the physical. The fourth dimension is more the infrared band, and it works in that area. And the fourth dimension is vast. It's so much bigger than the third dimension. We think of the life here on this third dimension that we're seeing, and you look out and you see all these planets and stars. Well, if you can imagine the next dimension, the fourth dimension, is even much more vast, which and it's filled with life. I mean, there's so much life on it. It's out there that it's just mind-boggling. And there's been a prime directive on Earth. They don't want to engage for several reasons. One, they don't want to interfere with their own evolution, and two, they don't want to deal with the aggression. They don't want to be shot at and have to defend themselves. So there's a lot of reasons why they're keeping their distance. But unfortunately, there were some lesser evolved ETs that did intervene and did try to move in and take over, and that's what we're in the process of eliminating right now.
So now I've heard a lot of people talk about light workers, for example, who are evolving, being on the fifth dimension. Would you agree with that? That there are people who are maybe a little bit more conscious who are existing in a fifth dimensional awareness?
Oh yeah, I mean, your consciousness could be anywhere on that vibration continuum. You could have a seventh dimensional consciousness and still have a body here. And that's the yogis, and a lot of the lamas and the enlightened ones are here, and they're sitting, in just total bliss, and they're in the plane of bliss. They're in the seventh dimension and operating from that level. And they have a very hard time relating to Earth, on the physical. It's just, everything's funny to them. It's like that you can't diminish their joy. But, and then there's sixth and fifth dimensional ones as well. But, yeah, you can definitely have a mixture of dimensions, or hang out mostly on one dimension, you might say, but still be here in a physical body.
So why were you chosen for this role? What's unique about you that you ended up in this very significant role in the awakening of consciousness and working with extraterrestrials?
Well, it's interesting because when I was initiated by this Orion Council of Light, I had a initiation where they just pulled me out of my body and up on the ship, and then they revealed to me there's 3 golden balls of energy that came and hit me in the chest. And after that, I had full memory of my different lifetimes here and off-world as well. So it all ties together. When I look at the big picture, it's like they chose me because I am them. I'm from there. I've been there, and there's so many people on this planet, and their soul, they're more from the Pleaidians or the Orion Council of Light, or they're from Sirius or one of these other systems in their soul, and they just don't fit in here. They have a really hard time dealing with Earth because they didn't come here to be absorbed by Earth. They came here to change it, and to bring that consciousness here to the Earth. And so they're having a really hard time, and they just don't understand people and why we do what we do. And that's okay. It's like, but it's kind of rough on them being here because they just don't fit in.
So what about, there's a lot of, in the mainstream anyway, well, maybe not so much mainstream, but about extraterrestrial abductions. Who's actually doing that, and what's the purpose of it?
Well, I've heard a lot of different stories on that, and the main story I've heard is that the Greys are heavily involved in that, and there are some reptilian energies that are involved on the low-level stuff. And some of the Greys they're stuck in evolution. They can't evolve because they're just pure mental, and they're cloned, and they don't have any. You've got to have powerful emotions and free will to ascend, to get to the next level. and they don't have that. They bred emotions out of their race, and so they're stuck in their evolutionary process. And they know this big universal shift is getting ready to happen, and they're out of place, because they got rid of their emotional body, and really the ultimate power in the universe is love. And if you don't have an emotional body, you're not tuning into it. And love is the life force. And so their bodies are deteriorating. They have these huge heads because all they care about is knowledge, but their bodies are deteriorating, and they made a really serious mistake. So they're trying to breed the human emotions and genetics, and create hybrids so they can survive and evolve. And that's what one main group is doing. And then, we have our governments doing things too, and these MyLab things and stuff like that. So there's a lot of that going on. But the good news is you can attune to the higher levels and everything's fine. It's like if you're having trouble with the lower levels, hook into the higher levels and tell them you want help, and they will. They'll come in and protect and guide and help you get rid of these other beings that are messing around with you.
Is the human civilization somehow significant in terms of either our physiology or our potential that all these extraterrestrial races are focused on our evolution at this point, or is this happening in multiple worlds throughout the universes?
It's happening everywhere. It's a big universal expansion that's happening. There's so much going on, and there's also some karma going on. I mean, some of our ancient ancestors that they call the Anunnaki are returning, and the ones returning are benevolent. They're here to take care of the fallen ones, and almost all of our religions go back to the Anunnaki, different groups. And if you really do the research on that, but there are some fallen ones here that misled humanity, and that, some were very abusive towards humanity, and so they told me they're here to right a wrong. They're here to there's a major recall on the fallen ones, you might say, that they're calling back and saying, okay, you're done here. You can't interfere anymore with this planet, and they're cleaning up a lot of the mess that they made, and there's one particular one named Marduk who was one of the Anunnakis, and he actually made a pact with the Reptilian and Greys, and for supreme power. He wanted to have total power over the entire earth, even his own people. And we're still cleaning that mess up. That happened 450,000 years ago or something like that. So we're still cleaning that up as well. So there's just so much going on. It's I hate to freak people out, give them too much information, but I think it's time we know. It's time we know what's really going on in the multiverse.
So the Anunnaki are what in the Bible is referred to as the fallen angels. Is that correct?
Yeah, it just means those who came from heaven to earth, basically, and it means beings that came here. But the only thing is, some of them were fallen and some of them were benevolent. A lot of people have a hard time when you read the Bible. The Old Testament. I mean, that guy was a wrathful, genocidal maniac. And then you have the New Testament, which Jesus talks about, and he talks about this all-loving, all-forgiving God. And so you tell people, well, are you going to accept the fact that your God is totally schizophrenic? Or are you going to realize something else happened there, in the past? And so he brought the new covenant. The new covenant is the image of this all-loving, all-forgiving God, and we have to forgive ourselves and start, behaving accordingly. But it's we really need to know our history so we can let go of it, and let go of the past and move forward.
So did the Anunnaki actually, from your knowledge, conduct genetic experiments on human beings to evolve us to where we are now, or did we just evolve naturally from the original creation?
Well, there's so much more to that story. People say, that they took a knuckle dragger that was here already and they upgraded it with their genetics and things like that. And so, but they didn't give us all the genetics. And so that's the victim role, going, they didn't give us it all. So whatever. But a lot of that did happen. But at the same time, there was other colonies here, like Atlantis and Lemuria were Pleaidian colonies. And so we're just a big mixture of different star nations here, and their plant and animal life as well. And and it's time that we just really respect that diversity and honor it, and work together. And instead of just saying my way or the highway, that's just not working anymore.
Mm-hmm. I just interviewed Michael J. Murphy last weekend. You're probably familiar with him, right? He's the one who made the chemtrail videos.
Yeah, Michael's a very good friend of mine.
Yeah. And so we're talking about global warming and how the argument for geoengineering is that there's global warming and they're trying to cool the earth and so on. But from Michael's research, obviously, it's being used for a lot of other reasons. I'm curious, from your perspective, is global warming even real? Is there really global warming happening?
My belief structure is I totally believe in climate change, but I wouldn't necessarily say, I can't say global warming, because certain parts of the planet are really cooling down and freezing, and I guess the overall global temperatures are on the decline. And so it'd be hard to say global warming, where I'm seeing some places are really heating up and going through droughts and things like that. But a lot of that is actually created by the chemtrails. And so what they're doing, I think, is extremely unnecessary. It's extremely dangerous, and it's having severe health impacts on not just the people, but nature itself. I mean, we're watching the forest die up here. And it's because of the massive aluminum and barium and strontium and all these other things they're dumping. And the aluminum blocks the uptake of water and nutrients to the tree. And so it's sad, but it's like they've declared war on nature itself, and they're just destroying the forest. And the fires are just beyond imagination, because, if you coat the leaves with aluminum, you're going to have a really hot fire. And when they're fighting fires up here, a lot of the firemen are just saying, I've never seen anything burn like this before, so fast, and move so quickly and put out so much heat. So it's having a major impact. And for the life of me, I just can't understand why they would be spraying these heavy metals on us, like, strontium and barium and aluminum, which are all accumulative and have serious side effects. And, what is the point? I mean, the only point I can see is that they want everybody to be, good little zombie robot consumers, and dumb everybody down and make everybody ill, because they're cashing in at the pharmaceutical side of things. But, it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. There's just nothing benevolent about it. And people need to really stand up and wake up and just say enough of this picture and stop it.
Now, I know you're doing some work with Michael Tellinger for an upcoming event, right? And now, am I correct in assuming that the Anunnaki were the civilization that Michael has done a lot of research on in, I believe it's Africa, right?
Yes.
And so that was the location that the Anunnaki probably settled in originally, and it sounds like they were mining gold or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And he found Adam's calendar and the original landing spot of Enki, and people do not really need to really understand that story, because you had Enki, which was a creator god, you might say, and he was very he was the scientist, a geneticist, and he loved his creations, and he loved the work he was doing, and he wanted to see it upgrade and go further and evolve. And DNA is always evolving. We're not locked into some pattern because of some being, that did some experiment on us. DNA is always evolving. It's always moving forward, but it evolves through consciousness. And so as we evolve our consciousness, our DNA follows suit as well. But and that's pretty much been proven. But there's other stories going on. It's like, as I said before, we had the Pleaidian colonies. We had all these other star nations here. And so we're this big mix of plant and animal and human genetics down here. It's this giant zoo, and it needs to be honored and respected, And Michael's doing a lot of work about that. But then you have Enlil, who was the warring god. He was the god of war and like a general. He was a defeated general. And so he showed up on the picture, and he just created a real mess of things. And he was the guy that would have no gods before him, and he's very jealous, very wrathful, and very demanding. And in fact, he wanted to see the experiment finished. that Enki was saying, hey, and warned Noah and all the other people and said, hey, build your boat, and all these things that they're talking about, and because Enki wanted everybody to survive and loved humanity, and Enlil wanted to experiment over, and just clean the slate and start over. So it's not all the Anunnaki are positive, and we need to realize that, and that's where we got our image of the bearded god, is from these Anunnaki, that were here quite a long time ago. And they also moved. They moved from place to place, and they and actually, let me see, Enki became Poseidon in the Greek culture, and Enlil became Zeus. And so you see their nature, their nature exemplified in these different beings. And so they warred among themselves, and then had to move because they were using extreme technology, atomic weapons and things like that. And that's historically recorded. But we really need to understand our real history so we can really understand ourselves and where we fit into the picture, and not recreate the same mistakes.
So who are the two gods in the Old and New Testament? Are they the two that you just mentioned?
Yeah, I believe so. And I've always felt, in the Jewish tradition, they talk about Jehovah the Terrible, and you couldn't even mention Jehovah's name without getting stoned or killed, basically. So anyway, so you've got that group, and then you have Yahweh, who is referred to as the God of love and peace, so they're two different beings. And people go, well, that's just one name is a derivative of another name. Well, actually, no, because it's very, very obvious that the way they behave, there are two separate beings.
Now, there's a lot of misconception and also controversy over who exactly Lucifer was. And some people believe that Lucifer was a being of light, and other people believe that Lucifer was Satan. Do you have any understanding of that?
Just my gut feeling says stay away from it. That energy. I always, people saying the Luciferian society and this and that, and they create all these things, and there are energies out there you don't want to align yourself with that aren't in our highest and best good, and just because you're light being too doesn't mean that you have our highest and best good, in respect. So I don't know. I've heard all these different stories about that, but I just don't go there. I take each experience by its merit, by its energy or its frequencies, and decide whether or not I want to deal with it, and if it's empowering me to make my own personal connection with spirit or source or God, whatever you want to call it, if it's giving me productive things, that it's helpful, it's serving, then I listen to it. If it's separating, and telling me I'm the chosen one and all this other stuff, then I get rid of it, because, the chosen ones are those who chose, basically. There is no group or no number, attached to that.
The work you're doing with Michael Tellinger, what exactly are you working on together? You have an event coming up. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. But yeah, we have a lot of events coming up. Basically we've got, I'll be May 29th through the 31st. I'll be at Contact in the Desert, and bringing all this information out and showing the ships and people interacting with the ships, and a lot of upcoming things. I have the sound of the ships and everything. I would be showing it there at that conference. And then June 12th through the 15th, we've got Michael Tellinger coming here, and he's going to talk a lot about Ubuntu and that movement, and how we can do away with. We don't go to a moneyless society and go into a contribution society, and a lot of different, programs that he's implementing, over in Africa, and they are working, they're working very well. And my thing about it, what he said, well, first we have to still stay within society because the money is the exchange of today's society, but we need to eventually move away from that and become more service-oriented and community-oriented, and things like that. So he talks a lot about that movement, and I don't think he's going to talk too much about he'll talk probably a little bit about the ancient ancestors and things, but and then June 19th to the 22nd, I'll be doing ambassador training, where I actually teach people who's who in the universe and the different levels, how to heal unseen negative influences, how to keep your energies clear and walk in your own self-authority. And you actually get to experience the different groups, the different beings, and the ships come in and put a show on and everything else. It's pretty amazing. But it's a major life-changing experience when people come to this workshop, because they get to engage the energy firsthand, and feel what it's like. And then July 2nd, we have our conference, our annual conference, July 2nd through the 5th. And we've got some great speakers. I've got Winston Strout coming out, Randy Kramer, Alexandra Metters, Rosemary Guiley, Michael Elajon, Laura Legere, John Rappaport, and myself. And we have some other ones coming on here real soon. We have some other people, Joel Garvin, which did Breakthrough Energy, I think is going to join us. And so that's going to be, an amazing event. And the early bird registration is ending June 8th, so that's coming up. But that event is amazing, because every year we have massive ships fly over and put on quite a show for people. And the energy is just phenomenal. When people come here, the whole conference building is just wall-to-wall orbs, filled up with orbs and light beams and things like that. So it's a real life-changing experience. And August 14th to the 16th, we have Laura Eisenhower coming out in Dr. Dream, and they'll be doing a talk, and she has some amazing information, both of them do. And she talks about the Mars colonies and all the other black projects and the other things going on, as well as shifting the energy of where we need to go. But she's great. But if people want to go to private invitation, eseti.com, they can get all of this information, or just go to eseti.org. They can find it there as well, which is easy. Or they can email us and just go to esetireservations@gmail.com, to get the rest of the information or find out more about coming to the ranch.
Now, speaking of the breakthrough energy movement, have you actually worked on or seen any actual free energy technologies or any alternative energy technologies that are very revolutionary?
Yeah, definitely I have. And I've been working with trying to get some of these things out. And some of it we had to put on the shelf because a couple people died, trying to get this information out. And the inventor had his lab blown up and his family threatened and everything. So I'm really hoping to get this moving out again. But, we have everything. We have unlimited fuelless energy. The output on these things, one device is about the size of a small pie plate, and it has 9 coils in it. Each coil puts out 25,000 watts, and it's ice cold when it's running. And if you don't put a governor on it and you let it go too fast, it'll actually blow a hole through the ceiling and end up in the sun or something, wherever. But it's amazing technology. There's a lot of other technologies now that they're using water, and they take any water, polluted water, whatever, they clean it, and it actually generates energy, a massive amount of energy, and it creates, and what comes out is pure oxygenated water on the other side of it. And so that's an amazing technology for, any kind of third world country where that needs power and water. And the water is actually a healing water as well. We can't say the heal word or cure word, but obviously if you fill your blood with oxygen, you're going to have some amazing, experiences. So even Otto Warburg gave us the cure for cancer in the 1920s, where he said you just increase the blood oxygen and raise the body pH, and it backs cancer out, because most cancer is anaerobic. So anyway, there's a lot of these technologies are just getting ready to come out now again, and I think the resistance to these coming out is becoming less and less, and it's happening all over the world right now. So these technologies are going to come out. But we have, even in our black projects, we have all this technology. We just have to make them more transparent and start releasing them to the mainstream.
Are there any technologies that are out in the marketplace now that are maybe not entirely to the extent that you're talking about, but are moving in the direction?
Yeah, the water technologies are out. I mean, those are out, and the generators are out that actually run on water and things like that. Those are out. Unfortunately, they're going to other countries, because our country's so screwed up right now. But we don't need any of these big nuclear plants. I mean, we haven't needed those for a long time. We have devices that'll run the turbines, fuellessly without radioactive waste and things like that. We've had that for a long time, and that's to me is the biggest travesty, is to have all these nuclear events going on, and meltdowns and shutdowns and explosions and everything else, when it's totally unnecessary. And the only thing we're lacking is the leadership right now, to get these technologies out.
So are these technologies that are coming out, are they extraterrestrial inspired, or just human beings are just becoming inspired to develop them?
Well, most of them are ET inspired, and they actually, some of them actually were gleaned from ET crash sites and part of that technology. But, some of these scientists were actually having encounters and having beings appear to them and actually put things in their hands, said, here's a chip, try this, things like that. So, but some of that stuff I can't really go into detail. I can't really talk about right now until it's time, because their lives are in jeopardy, to go public with it.
So let's talk a bit about the government space program. How do you know that some of the craft that you're seeing over your ranch are not government projects?
Well, we definitely are seeing some of the government projects up there, and you can kind of tell by how they function or how they operate. But we've had triple PhD Boeing engineers and Skunk Works people and Air Force base commanders up here, and they've seen the ships up here, and they just said they aren't ours. We don't know who they are, because they will morph into one ship and become three and back to one again, and just do things that defy all physics. And they show how, that these are very, very advanced beings. And so, I'm sure some of these things are government, that we're seeing up there flying around, but the ones that are coming down low and interacting with us are definitely not government, because you feel an energy exchange that happens with them. And that's one of the big indicators I tell people, if you see a metal ship, it doesn't always mean, that it's a good thing. It might be our own government. It might be a low-level ET. It might not be that, might not be in your highest and best good. So it's important to develop your own inner sensitivity and use discernment on who you work with.
How far advanced is our technology, the human technology, in terms of space travel?
Extremely advanced. One of the guys, I think it was with Lockheed, one of the head guys of Lockheed, he said that, we have the technology now to take ET home. And so it's extremely, we have some pretty extreme stuff going on. We have things that jump dimensions now, and time travel and things like that. We're playing with things along that line.
Mm-hmm. Is there any risks to human beings playing around with time travel technology at this point, or is there something universally in place to prevent us from causing problems?
Well, yeah, I know people that are playing with technology they shouldn't be, and they screwed things up back in the days of Atlantis, and they are being watched, and they have these beings, light beings appearing to them, and hovering outside their windows and things like that. And they're going, what's going on? And they're being very much watched because they don't want to repeat, the same experience. But yeah, I do think that's very well monitored, and they'll let them do so many things with it. But if it gets too crazy, if they start interacting and interfering with history and things like that, then they step in.
So do you believe that the Atlantis becoming submerged was a result of technological disaster of some kind?
Yeah, it was a definite misuse of technology, and the real story behind that, people have a hard time with it, but the Atlanteans, actually, the Lemurians, were very kind of earth-oriented, family-oriented. They saw the creator in all creation, and they worshiped the unseen God and everything and everyone. Very advanced people, and they had their technology as well. They had ships, and they had ships in space and things. And then the Atlanteans were they went more towards the intellect, not all of them. And they were really into science and technology, and they started using that technology to overpower others and manipulate others, which is exactly what our own government is doing right now. And so they went to an extreme misuse of technology, and the Lemurians were warning them about it. and saying, hey, you need to chill out. You're going in the wrong direction with this. You're breaking universal law. And so eventually the Atlanteans just took their beam ships and all their weapons and went over and just pretty much laid to waste the Lemurian side of things. And the Gobi Desert is a good example. There's this huge area in the Gobi Desert, this glass. There's this green glass. And that's where they did one of the meltdowns, that happened using extreme technology. But the Lemurians actually guided a small a meteor in to take care of Atlantis, and I think it had a little bigger impact than they were expecting, But that's why you've got a big hole there, and a huge nuclear blast happened, and that took out Atlantis. And there's other things happening too, and then ever since then, the Earth was just going through all kinds of changes and shifts, and they ignited the atmosphere, and they dropped the heavens, you might say, that they call the canopy. At that time, the Earth was around 70 degrees all the way around. There weren't any polar caps or anything else, and so that created the great floods that everybody hears about and talks about, and things of that nature. So there's just much more to the story than we've been told. There's a lot more involved.
So were the Lemurians and Atlanteans both different human races, or multidimensional, or were they extraterrestrial races? Do you have any concept on that?
They were Pleiadian colonies. And,
both of them were.
Yeah, they both were Pleiadian colonies, and one split off and went in one direction. The other split off and went in the wrong direction, basically. And so this basically us, they're our ancestors, and they're back now. They're returning, and they're very benevolent. They're very advanced, and they're transcended war and all the other problems that came with the Earth. And they didn't have to start over as primitives like we did because of the Earth changes and the cataclysm. So they kept evolving, and now they're returning to help us out to reset the planet. And the planet was actually in Eden. It was a place where the physical would evolve to its highest potential, and we could actually come and walk right among all the creations that we created in the past. And so it's supposed to be a beautiful place, and it got hijacked by the lower level entities, and then it just went downhill from there. But there's a big reset going on right now, so it's all going to be reset and put back on track again.
So the Pleaidians that are back now are both the Lemurian and Atlantean consciousness, so both of them have risen to a higher level now. Yeah.
And they went out and they created colonies, and the ancient Lyrians created colonies in the Pleiades, in the Hades system, and the Orion system. And then they came to Mars and Maldek and Earth, and Maldek is now the asteroid belt. It blew up and it stripped the atmosphere off of Mars, and that was another misuse of technology. So there's just a lot more to our history than we know about, and there were several star nations. There are actually 12 major star nations that were involved in the evolution of Earth and terraforming and bringing their genetics here.
Mm-hmm. I just interviewed Dr. Sam Asmanagic. Are you familiar with him?
Yes, Dr. Sam. He's great.
He was out here actually at an expo we put on as well, and so he's doing some pretty amazing research out there in Bosnia. From your perception, who do you think built the various pyramid cities around the world, and what kind of technology produced that? Were they manifested into reality, do you think, into our material reality, or were they physically built somehow?
They're physically built, from my understanding, but with extreme technology. And they use lasers to cut the stones and sound to levitate them and move them into place. And they're all connected. All the pyramids are connected. And they're just now starting to find these massive tunnel systems, and they go to each pyramid. But extremely advanced geometry and is in the pyramids, and just the ability to build the pyramids and the stones that they lifted into place and everything is far beyond today's civilization. So these were very advanced beings that actually were extraterrestrial in origin, that built the pyramids. But I hate to say extraterrestrial. I always tell people we're the extraterrestrials we've been looking for, because because genetically that most of us are from somewhere else that came here as the Earth was colonized several times.
Now, obviously, conventional archaeologists believe that the pyramids were built as tombs for pharaohs or all around the world. More current research, such as what Dr. Sam is working on, is showing otherwise. Why do you think they were built? Was there a purpose behind them? Are they technology, or why go to all that trouble?
Well, they had different. Some were like time capsules, and the way they were built conveyed all this information to us. Some were initiation chambers where people were going there to be initiated. The sarcophagus, in the king's chamber, basically was set up as an initiation, that they would take people through the Egyptian mystery schools, and they would take them into the sarcophagus. They'd lay them down, and they'd put the lid on. And they said, "We'll see you in 3 or 4 days," to see if they'd make it, through that shift. And you had to really have your act together and know how to control your body and everything else to make it through that initiation. So, and there's some extreme energy there too, and a lot of the openings on the pyramids line up straight with Orion or Pleiades or whatever. People would actually go out of body and travel to these other places and get communications and things. So there's just a lot more to the pyramids. They weren't tombs, where are the pharaohs? Where are the dead bodies? They aren't there. And I think different pyramids have different stories, represent different things.
Is there a particular message that some of these benevolent extraterrestrial races are wanting us to know as a human civilization?
Yeah. Basically, the main message is the same message that all the masters have been giving for a long time, is they want us to start being kind to each other and kind to the planet and live a spiritual life, in harmony with each other and nature. It's just the same message, they want us to end the wars and they want the war and disease profiteers to quit, and perpetuating these wars and diseases, and they're very concerned with us and where we're going. They want us to evolve and take the high road, basically.
You mentioned earlier that we should start, instead of feeding all these negative things in the world, to move toward something better. So how would you suggest, in terms of if somebody was listening to that and thinking, well, how do I take those steps in a more positive direction in my life? What sorts of things should we be looking to do?
Well, I think it's important that, food should be your medicine, and so we really need to check out where our food is coming from, go as organic as possible and get away from all the processed food and things. Do a lot of cleanses, get rid of because we almost have to do cleanses right now, because we're just getting bombarded with everything you can imagine, from the fluoride in the water, and now they're putting chlorine and ammonia in the water now. It's like, it's crazy what they're doing with the water. There's over 600 to 800, carcinogens in the water, that they're finding. But be very clear about where your water is coming from. Try to find a very pure source. Again, do whatever kind of heavy metal cleansing, detoxing we can do right now to get this stuff out of our system. And we need to, get process, the old wounds and traumas, the old grudges. We need to let go of those, because they're creating our if we don't release the past, we're going to just recreate it and create the same scenarios until we heal and heal the old wounds and traumas from past experiences. And then they want to really clean up our mental and emotional bodies, and also start practicing some spiritual practice with some form of prayer or meditation or qigong, or we do a lot of that here in different techniques. And we do a lot of qigong here, which is a very, very ancient form of very simple form of movement and meditation. I think there's so many different things we can do. And then the main thing the yogis talk about, right thinking, right action, right eating, the 8 limbs of yoga. We need to start looking at those and start practicing those, in our daily life. And it just seems that we know what to do, but there's such a force that's trying to pull us off of that program, and it's sad, because when you look at all the food additives and the aspartame, and as I was saying before, the water, and then you got the chemtrails and TV bombarding you, and all the cell tower frequencies, all that stuff is designed to take you, off your center and away from your own health and well-being. And so we just need to start readjusting our lives and try to eliminate as much of that as possible out of our lives.
A number of years ago, I used to sun gaze very regularly for quite a few years. And so, and I wanted to ask this question earlier, but it slipped my mind. When we're talking about the sun, why do you suppose sun gazing has been practiced for so long in countries such as India, for example, and it's really experiencing a resurgence all around the world? And even in ancient Egypt, there was a focus on the sun, and a lot of those hieroglyphs seem to suggest that they either worshiped the sun, or they respected the sun, or they looked at the sun. What's the significance of that?
Well, even NASA did some studies, and they found out that sun gazing has profound effects on the positive effects, on the body. Changes your DNA, changes your endocrine system, all these effects that are really positive with the sun. And to me, I feel like a solar battery. If I'm not in the sun, I don't feel good. If I'm not out working in the sun or working in nature. Also, too, the sun is the best example of God, I think, because it shines on everybody equally. It doesn't judge, it doesn't condemn. It says as you wish, and just keeps shining on everybody, and we choose how much of it we experience or want to partake in. So I think it's an incredible example of what the source is. It just keeps giving and giving and giving, and then we do with that energy what we choose. And the same thing in consciousness. If we attune to love and joy and bliss and service and work in that direction, that's where that energy is going to go, and we're going to get that feedback loop from that. If we turn into the greed and the separation and the aggression and all these other things, then we're going to have that reality. So it's like a benign energy that just says as you wish, do what you want with this energy I'm sending you, and there's a lot of miscreation going on and a lot of positive creation as well. And that's what I see, is that it's an incredible source of consciousness and energy, and the planet would be toast without it. I mean, it would be, and that brings up another thing, is that the planet would be toast if it wasn't for the ETs, because they have blocked some kill shots that actually came from the sun, that because the sun really threw off some huge coronal mass ejections, and the ETs actually put their ships in front of it and expanded their fields and blocked it from the earth. So there's a lot to be grateful for, and they're doing a lot on our behalf and hoping to get us through these times and through these changes.
Mm-hmm. So tell me some of the other technologies that are out there that maybe our government has and so on. I mean, how far advanced are we in terms of what is available, maybe not available to the mainstream, but that is out there?
Well, I mean, we have technologies that we have one craft that they power it up and it starts jumping frequencies that they keep going up and changes colors, and it's going up through the dimensions, basically. We're that far advanced, and we have fuelless technology, and anti-gravity just floats things, in the air. And you want counter-gravity, which propels things, and we have that as well. And it's, that shoots things off several thousand miles an hour almost instantly. We have all of that technology, all the fuelless energy technology and healing technology. We have regeneration chambers and things like that, where these super soldiers, they get blown to bits and they throw them in this changer and it totally rebuilds them, rebuilds their arms and legs and everything else. So, I mean, we have all of that technology. It's just not just the elite have it, it's not in the mainstream. And can you imagine if we were a civilization that actually employed that technology on a daily basis, how we would live? I mean, we wouldn't have poverty, we would lack for nothing. We wouldn't have all the diseases plaguing us right now. And the universe would be our playground, not just the earth. We wouldn't be, trapped on the earth, and we could clean up our environment very quickly with these technologies as well. So, And I think that's what's happened with unity consciousness, is the people that are keeping these technologies from humanity and the earth, and the benevolent technologies are losing right now. They can't continue in that process. So it's what unity consciousness is all about. The separation game is over, and the unbridled greed and separation and control and domination game is coming to an end. And that as that energy increases, you're going to see all these new technologies come forward.
In the Bible and other ancient stories, such as even Krishna, they talk about how people live for thousands or even tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of years. Do you think that's a factor of maybe the Earth was different back then, or is it that the magnetic field of the Earth has become weaker over the years, or what do you think is a factor of that? And are we headed back toward a future where lifespans might increase?
A lot of it has to do with the canopy dropping, and the Earth being a constant 70 degrees and this beautiful canopy over us, and that really extended life. And the consciousness of the people were the genetics were very advanced back then with certain groups and certain people, and some of the people that actually helped create a lot of the flora here on the Earth, that did a lot of experimentation, are still alive. The terraformers, they're still around, and they're still alive today, and they're thousands of years old. So it's kind of interesting. It puts things in perspective. There was a woman, a Pleaidian female that I connected with named Plumeria. I said, well, it sounds like the flower, Plumeria. And she said, yeah, I was named after that flower. And I said, well, why would you be named after an earth flower, being Pleaidian? She said, well, my ancestors created it, created that flower, that tree, and through genetic experimentation. So a lot of the plants and things that we're seeing today, especially the really ornate and beautiful ones, were actually engineered, and were brought here from other places.
So this Pleaidian being you're referring to, is this a physical being, or is it somebody who's projecting to this dimension for periods of time, or who is this person?
Yeah, she's a fifth dimensional being, but she drops in. She can drop in, and when I go into meditation, I see her. I can go out of body and hang out on that dimension, which is another story. But they have the ability to actually engage us, and interact with us, and drop their frequencies down. They don't like to, because it's very hard for them to be here energetically, but they can, and they will as we rise the occasion. We can't expect them to drop down and fix everything. We need to rise the occasion, and when we do that, they'll meet us halfway.
Now, Pleaidians are not only on the fifth dimension, right? They're on multiple dimensions.
Yeah, there's 6th, 7th dimensional Pleaidians, and there's even elven beings that are. I've even met some 6th dimensional elven beings that are out there. So it's we're multidimensional beings. We're just not a body and a personality. We have a spirit that has many dimensions to it, and so we're just not aware of it. And as you were saying before, we could be connecting on the 7th dimension and bringing that consciousness and energy through this body here on Earth, and that's possible as well.
And so, how does one know what dimension they're functioning from, and does it even matter what they know?
I know the people that are saying they're operating from the 5th dimension usually aren't, because if you are, you're not going to be talking about it, But it's kind of funny. But I've heard so many different stories. I'm a 12th dimensional being, and this and that, and I have experienced 9th dimensional beings in the past, but that's about as high as the beings that I've experienced. But extremely loving beings, very powerful beings, But you would know, because you just don't function on the planet like most people. You see way beyond what's going on, and you live more according to the universal law, and you're in service usually, and you just see things from a much higher perspective.
So what sort of things are you seeing in our material reality, let's say in the financial system? In the last decade or so, we've seen a major collapse and maybe even partial restructuring of the financial system.
Yeah.
And I actually just interviewed a few weeks ago a gentleman who wrote a book, Pete Hendrickson, on the IRS tax code and so on. And so we're seeing a lot of information that's been kept secret coming out to public awareness.
Yes.
But what do you see happening in the global financial system, and where do you see it going?
Well, in the big picture, the tyrants are falling. I mean, tyranny is over with, basically, and so that whole program is falling apart, and it's going to be replaced by something else. I've been in contact with some of these families that they talk about. You know, the Chinese families that actually have just massive amounts of gold, unbelievable amounts of gold, and they're willing to help prop up the dollar and save you know, our butt, basically, because of the psychopaths running the country right now that with their unbridled greed. But there are some things. There's a lot of paperwork being done, a lot of agreements being made that people don't even know about, and the old tyranny program is being unraveled, and we're going to go into a much more beneficial, much more abundant society, and we're moving in that direction, and it's going to be back to, our Federal Reserve note will probably go back to the Treasury. Will probably be, the Federal Reserve will come to an end, and they'll be backed by gold, and it'll be a whole different system. But that's what's in the works, and that looks like where it's going right now. It could get hijacked again for temporarily, but I don't think it'll hold. So we're moving into a whole different world, and this whole manufactured lack and the suppression energy and the domination control programs are all coming to an end, and the people that are behind them are being exposed, and their empires are folding in on themselves and imploding, and because they're not frequency specific to where the Earth is going and these waves of energy that are coming through.
So you don't think things such as Bitcoin are going to catch on? You really see the current currency actually being taken over by our government as opposed to the Federal Reserve as the direction things are heading?
Well, I don't know, but a lot of these, I kind of support a lot of these different shifts in Bitcoins and things like that, because they're taking the money away from the Illuminati and the banksters and putting it back in the people's hands. And so there probably will be some new things that are going to come forward like that, where people are saying, I'm not going to support the beast anymore. I'm going to do something else. So, they will probably grow and move forward. But eventually it'd be great if we went to a cashless society where this is an abundant universe that we live in, and we don't need cash. Most advanced civilizations don't have a monetary system. They operate completely differently, and they want for nothing. So all the lack is manufactured. Even the food, everything, it's all manufactured, and it's manufactured by a small elite group of people. And once they let go of their stranglehold, everything's going to shift back into abundance. And I always use an ear of corn. Like one ear of corn has 500 kernels on it. If you take those 500 kernels and put them in the ground, you have 500 ears of corn with 500 kernels. If you do the math, nature is so abundant and it's exponential, and that's the way things should be. But this other programs that are in place just actually create this manufactured lack, and so there's no reason why everybody can't be fed and housed and follow their dream, and follow their own unique purpose for being here and have everything else covered, because, we do live in a very abundant universe. We just have to remove the lack manufacturers, you might say, or the people that are hoarding, or sitting on trillions and trillions of dollars for no reason, that we just have to get rid of that program.
So in your interactions with various extraterrestrial races and seeing the various UFO sightings, is there anything that you haven't already mentioned that you think is the most profound or fascinating thing that you've experienced or seen?
The near-death experience was the top. Like after experiencing the source and hanging out in that pure golden light of just incredible love and joy and bliss, that it's hard to top that, and now everything's just interesting, so I meet all these different beings and have these other connections going on, and it's all just interesting, but I don't let it take me away from my own personal connection with source, but there are so many things unfolding here. One of the funniest ones is we're having a lot of Bigfoot activity right now, and this juvenile Bigfoot is running around the property here, really messing with people's heads. And it's Clyde Lewis, who has Ground Zero Radio, was here, and this juvenile ran right up to him and skidded, and slid and smiled and then took off running the other way. And I saw it running the other way. I didn't see the first part of it, but a couple of his engineers were here and saw it, and he went public, and I went out and got a print of it. I took a picture of its footprint, you know, and you can see it's definitely not a human footprint at all. It has a broken arch in it because they have more of an ape foot that has an arch that is broken. But you know, things like that are happening all the time. Light beings are appearing. You know, the orbs are flying through the house. You know, it's like, and now it's just like, oh, what's next? You know, this is interesting, and sometimes I have other beings show up here that we need to escort out. You know, we have to say, okay, you're not welcome here. You know, move on. You know, so so I live a very interesting life. I never know what's going to be next.
So what is Bigfoot exactly?
It's part of the human experience that evolved in nature. It didn't evolve with technology. It actually worked with nature and evolved in nature. And they're extremely advanced beings, and they have abilities. They're not a dumb ape. You know, they're very advanced. And some of the researchers up here, the scientists, say they're this Gigantopithecus, or I don't know what some name they give it, and they say it's just this big dumb ape. And I said, well, the problem is this big dumb ape has outsmarted you every time, and every one of your traps and the food you left and everything, it's got it. It got the food, and you don't have any pictures, anything. You know, so I said, if it's this dumb ape, how come it's outsmarts you every time? You know, so they're very advanced. They can appear and disappear. They can. I've seen 3 or 4 of them, and I've watched them dematerialize right in front of my eyes, and you know, my experience with them has been very benevolent. They're extremely sensitive beings. But they are very shy, and they really don't want to have a lot to do with humanity, just because of our aggressive nature and our lack of integrity concerning connecting with them. You know, everybody wants to make a buck, you know, and things like that. So they just take the high road, and you know, humans are very loud in the forest, you know, walking in the forest, and they know we're coming like miles away. So that's their world, you know, and they can appear and disappear at will. So they have a saying here, the elders say, you know, if you go searching for Bigfoot, you'll never find him. But if Bigfoot wants to find you, it will. So it's all about having your head right and having your conscience right. And maybe take a flute out in the forest. They're very curious, you know, and meditate, play your flute, and they'll probably come and check you out, you know, and see where you're at in consciousness.
Well, we've talked about a lot of very interesting things today. What is there anything else that you're seeing happening in the world that we haven't yet talked about that you think is really incredible, or that stands out as something that we should all be paying attention to, or that might even be a sign of where things are going?
Well, what I see is this unity consciousness wave is actually uniting all these other countries, and they're all coming together, even financially, you know, with the BRICS Union and all these other things. And they're just saying, we're done. We're done with the aggression. We're done with the war, and, you know, we're done with the, you know, using the military as the brute squad for the corporate interest and things like that. And so there's a big shift and a big change right now, and it's really good. And I think, you know, we need to get in gear and align ourselves with this energy, this change, and again start supporting the beast. I mean, we're the biggest terrorists on the planet right now, and the biggest exporters of the wars and industry and so we can't be pointing a finger at other countries and other things if we don't have our own act together. And so I think that people are waking up to that fact right now, and they're just not playing the game anymore and not investing in it or not participating in it. And that's the most important thing right now is on a global level, people are just saying, no, you know, I'm not going to participate in anything that's harmful to humanity, the earth, or you know, we're seeing, you know, the borders more coming down, and people are becoming less judgmental, less aggressive towards other nations, and it's a really, the tyrants are having a really hard time of keeping it together right now, which is good. And that's what they tell me, is that the age of tyranny is over. It's just collapsing as we speak, and so those who are aligned with that program are not going to be around much longer. Their empires are going to crash.
So this next few years, you said, do you anticipate a world where we have peace, where we have free energy and all of that in just a few years, or do you think that's just the beginning of where things start to settle down? Because there's still a lot of chaos in the world, and even people who are more conscious are going through a lot of personal struggles in their life and so on. So what, do you anticipate that kind
Yeah,
of?
what I see is that people are waking up to the chaos and who's financing chaos and who's behind the chaos. And you'd be surprised if you really found out where ISIS is getting its money from and things like that. It would shock you. And where all these arms are coming from that are creating all this chaos. And these arms are actually used on our own people. We're selling the very arms that are being used against our own people. And this has been going on for a long time. And people are just waking up to that, there's a lot of arms dealers that are making a lot of money. The war industry is cashing in, and a lot of people are dying, and people are just saying, we don't want to participate in this anymore. And that's what I'm seeing. There's just a big shift in consciousness, and the tyrants are not getting away with what they used to get away with, and people are just saying, no, we're not going there anymore. And I'm just seeing, I was very involved in this Monsanto thing, and over in Hawaii. And, we brought everything to the people. They had a vote, and they said, okay, moratorium, no more. You're destroying the land here. They're poisoning the water. Our kids and the land is dying, because of what you're doing. And you have to prove to us that this is not harming the land according to our Constitution. Well, they won. And the people spoke and everything. And then the federal came in and just said no, and totally denied the people their voice, their vote, and everything else, which is going to go over like a lead brick there, so it's all starting back up again. And people need to get behind that, that movement. And that's what I'm saying is that people are waking up. There's thousands and thousands of people marching around the world right now against Monsanto, and big movement in India and all these other countries. And a lot of countries have banned, the GMOs. And it's just part of this process that we're seeing. People are waking up and starting to stand up and say enough's enough. And I see more and more of that until the tyranny game just totally collapses in on itself. And then the separation game is over, and we move back into abundance and working, in service and cooperation versus competition.
Where exactly is ISIS getting its funding?
Well, us. ISIS is us, but follow the money,
tax dollars.
Yeah. Bottom line, just follow the money. You'll find out exactly where, because, we got to keep the wars going. We got to keep things unstable to control it. We can't have everybody unifying over there because they'd unify and throw us out, so it's a lot of these, just this whole media and everything is just a really bad joke being perpetuated on humanity. And I don't like to go there and even deal with that kind of energy, but people need to know what they're financing, what they're supporting, and need to pull their money out of it and stop. We can't feed the beast anymore. And, the old Native American prophecies, they say there's a beast, and the beast is 2,000 miles wide, which means it's going to live for 2,000 years. And this beast is all-consuming. It wants to dominate and control everything. And finally, in the end, the beast consumes itself. And when that happens, we move to 1,000 years of peace, and the new technologies come out, the star nations return, and the planet is healed very quickly. And that's their prophecies. And that's what I see unfolding.
So what about organizations such as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that are going around the world and promoting vaccines and GMO foods, and obviously it's caused a lot of disasters in various countries. And I've found that actually a lot of major outbreaks seem to happen wherever the Gates Foundation has been. And so do you think that GMO foods and vaccines are primarily to dumb down people, or is it a eugenics project, or what's the motivation behind that?
It's population control, basically. I mean, he even blatantly said it, on
Right.
TED Talk. So he said the vaccines are going to take care of the population program, but, when you have 12 to 24 cases of polio, and then after the vaccines, you have 45,000, and people dropping like flies, obviously there's a problem there. And people need to, and there's whole countries now that are figuring this out, and they're going to be holding him accountable for what's happening there. So it's all opposites. People think these people are philanthropists and they're here to help society, but they really aren't. When you really look at the outcome of what they're doing, I mean, we all know the outcome of Monsanto and these Frankenfoods and all this stuff. The science is in, you know, and Roundup and all the other chemicals that they're using, what they do to the environment and to the physical body, you know, and even to invest in Blackwater. You know, what does he need a military, his own private military for? What is he afraid of? You know, the people figuring out, you know, what happened. So basically, you know, all this stuff is just, and that, you know, I hate to say it, but that what happens, these people, they may start out right, and then they get involved with the high level, you know, parties and groups and the Illuminati, and the next thing you know, they've sold their soul, and they're being, you know, they're just being puppets for other darker forces. But that whole program is collapsing. So there's going to be consequences. You know, that eventually, you know, there's going to be major consequences, and I don't see them getting away with anything very long. It's all coming to the head right now.
So if that's all true, then why is it that so many people still buy Microsoft products and still look up to him as this icon of positive things going on in the world? If we're only a few years away from awakening, more significant awakening, how can so many people still be so much asleep, do you think?
Well, I mean, a lot of people are actually using his own equipment to take him down. So I mean, the word is getting out through his own equipment to who he is and what he's done and everything else. So yeah, they're still buying it, but they're still waking up and figuring out, you know, what's happening. And you know, and it is sad that we are, you know, sometimes we don't have a lot of other choices, but you know, I'm a Mac person myself, but you know, but even that, you know, I just say, well, I can use this technology to reach a lot of people, you know, and so I use the technology for that. But I think eventually we're going to get to a point where you know, there's going to be an overall consciousness where technology that is earth friendly, that's serving humanity and creating better communication and things like that is going to be, you know, allowed and enhanced and go forward. And the other technology that's being used to control and to not, you know, dominate and manipulate and spy and all that stuff is going to collapse, you know, and people are just going to pull the funding from it. And I know for a fact right now that the powers that be that have been funding all these things are losing their funding, and they're losing their ability to gather funds. And so it's just a matter of time before these agencies collapse in on themselves, and there's a little prophecy there. You'll see that happening here in the next 2 years, where people are saying, no, we're not going to pay to be spied on. We're not going to be paid for this. We're not going to, and I don't care who you are, Mr. Senator, you know, we're not going to, you know, because you've been bought and sold and, you know, all this other program, they said, we're not buying it anymore. And the people are just rising up. So, you know, a lot of these people that are in bed with these other agencies are going to lose their jobs. You know, they're going to be, you know, dealt with accordingly.
So do you think that there's going to be, are you seeing that there are going to be contingencies in place for transition to happen in a more smooth way? Because obviously if all these agencies start collapsing, people will start panicking, right? Yeah.
No, there are contingencies in place, and there's a big global plan that's being, you know, acted out right now, and I'm fully aware of that plan. I don't want to tell too much about it until it unfolds, but you know, it's like the Federal Reserve note is basically toilet paper. You know, now that the BRICS Union has come forward and everything else, it's not the world currency anymore, and we've printed so much of it that it's basically, you know, useless unless somebody comes in and props it up, you know, and that is going to happen. And then the money's going to go back to and the people that have the ability to print that money, that have been misusing it, are going to lose control of it. And so once they lose control of that, you know, they lose control of the other agencies too as well. They are getting funding from there, and there's just a big shift. You know, we do need a Defense Department, and the powers that are stepping in and shifting things realize that. You know, we need to stop with the Offense Department, you know, and things like that. So it's happening, you know, not as fast as a lot of us like to see, but it is happening, and it is happening on very high levels, you know, right now. So it's like the top down. So eventually these guys won't have a grid. They won't have a support system to keep them going.
So it sounds like you're overall pretty optimistic that we've turned the corner to where we're not going to go back to a less conscious, darker world, but we are for sure headed toward a more positive future.
Yeah, the consciousness is going in that direction, and consciousness is cause, and the world is the effect of that consciousness. So on the level of consciousness and energy, the war's already been won, and it's just a matter of it trickling down to this level and creating heaven on earth, basically. And that's up to us. We got to do our part.
Mm-hmm. Can you share with us any other websites or places where people can get involved with your work, or maybe even find out about your books?
Oh, yeah, definitely. You can, go to the website eseti.org. And I've written 3 books, Reunion with Source, Becoming Gods, and The Ultimate Soul Journey. And those are all on the website. You can get them through there. And we have a lot of DVDs, a lot of videos, a lot of my talks at, the upcoming one at Contact in the Desert. We'll have that back online real fit. As soon as I get back, we'll have that available. And there's just so much information on that website. And we have, physicists and teachers and healers from around the world that come to the ranch and do workshops and classes, and we videotape them and archive that as well. So there's so much information there. It's just a plethora of masters and teachers, that have given their all, to society, and they want people to evolve as well. And a lot of people that would come to the ranch, we choose people, by their heart and by their service. A lot of the ones that, I hate to use the word posers, but the people that are out there just doing the see me, dig me thing and out there for the cash and the notoriety, they don't come to the ranch. We don't have those people come to the ranch. And so we focus on people that are very heart-centered, very service-oriented, and really, really care about humanity, the earth, and the direction humanity is going, versus, the self-centered programs that have been plaguing us for so long.
Well, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. Do you have any last-minute words of inspiration or anything you want to share?
Basically, it's all about consciousness, and we need to get our consciousness in order here on the planet and start being kind to each other and see the Creator in all creation, including ourselves, and start doing no harm, basically, and everything will turn. We know the rules. We know universal law. It's written in the hearts of all of us. We all know how to behave. We just need to step up to the plate and stop, selling out, and choosing to live a life of integrity, impeccable integrity, and start shifting in service, and cooperate, versus compete.
Well, thank you again for joining me for an episode of Awaken Empowered TV. I'm looking forward to following your work, and hopefully we'll have you out here at one of our expos in the near future.
Oh, I'd love to. And thanks so much for the work you're doing and getting this information out.
Thank you, James.